So this is my favorite and least favorite books I read or stories I read in 2023. So we'll start with my favorite reread, and that was Philip Jose Farmer's To Your Scattered Bodies Go, a science fiction story about a future where all of humanity has been wiped out, but they're all resurrected on this planet that has this river valley between these two very high mountainous cliffs that weaves back and forth across the entirety of a planet, and every human who has ever lived on Earth and other things who ever lived on Earth, are resurrected on this river valley, and it's just sort of like a big experiment to see what happens. And we follow the historical explorer and writer Richard Burton as he tries to find the source of this river and why this has happened. A really great, slim, fast-paced, adventure-y science fiction novel that won, I believe, a Hugo. And did it win a Nebula? I should know that, but I can't remember. But it did win a Hugo for sure. So that was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed revisiting that. There's a whole series. The second book, I did read the second book and didn't talk about it, but the second book has a very different tone than the first book, and it's a lot more somber, a little kind of sad in a sense. It follows Mark Twain as he and it's also like not as adventurous because it's a lot more like sort of like developing the world of Riverworld and sort of like kind of further exploring that mystery, but not a lot of adventure-y stuff happening. A good book, just not the same kind of book as the first one. And there were a few books that I started and didn't finish. Callahan Chronicles by Spider Robinson. I started that series. It is a collection of short stories that were published in periodicals. And they're not really bad, but I don't really feel that they work very well read one right after another. They just kind of, I don't know, they became less and less entertaining to me the more of them I read in a row. So I just kind of stopped at some point and thought I wasn't going to give it a fair shake if I just kept reading it that way. I might go back and finish it. I've got about half of that collection read. Some of them are kind of funny, kinda. Some of them are not very funny. Some of them are just a little bit too like I don't really know the right word. Like not a good kind of earnest. They're earnest, but not. I don't want to. I guess the only thing I could say, what comes to mind, is say like cringe-ish, but that's not quite right. It's a little bit too quaint. I don't know. So I stopped that. The other one was What Goes On in the Walls at Night by Andrew Schaefer, I think. It just, I don't know. It's something about that. It wasn't bad. It was okay. But something about it reminded me of a book I did finish that I wasn't crazy about. And I guess I'll talk about that. And that was Carlton Mellick III's Cannibals of Candyland. He's known for like the creator of sort of the bizarro fiction genre. So I tried this story. And I don't know. It wasn't really great. I finished it, but honestly, not really. I wouldn't really recommend it. It felt kind of like something you would get out of maybe a creative writing class from like high school or maybe first couple years in college or something. Not great. Not great. I have to go ahead and do my my 10 favorite reads that I had in this year, and one more that I was disappointed in. So, not exactly in particular order, at least for the first 7 of these favorites. They're not exactly in order. They're just, I enjoyed these books, and I had to, of course, to make a list of 10, because people like the number 10, I had to sort of like pick and choose. And so some things that I maybe would have included here, I didn't, or maybe I didn't quite finish them by the end of this year. They're not on the list. So that goes. It's, there was definitely more than this, but these are the ones I had to pick. I had to make choices. So Philip Fracassi's Sacculina was a novella I read. First thing I ever read by Fracassi. Really liked it. Very, very good. Kind of, I would say, strong early Stephen King vibes, but with a slightly different tone, which I appreciated. It doesn't feel like a Stephen King clone, but it's like if you enjoy that early Stephen King, I think that Philip Fracassi is a thing to do. And I guess I notice now that a lot of other people are like talking about Philip Fracassi, so I can understand why. I've got some Philip Fracassi books sort of lightly penciled in for this year. I probably will read at least one. I just don't know which one and can't say when. Then we have Killer by Peter Tonkin, a book from the 70s, I believe, late 70s, or mid 70s. I can't remember when. I should know, but I don't remember. About a government trained giant killer whale that goes on a rampage as it tries to eradicate this scientific Arctic expedition whose plane crash lands on a ice floe. A really great book, a horror novel, but also like an adventure story and a bunch of other stuff. It just did a whole lot of other things that I just didn't expect. I bought it honestly for the cover. I mean, that's kind of like, this is a crazy cover. I kind of want to read. It's one of the paperbacks from Hell reprints. I wanted to read one. That's the one I picked, and it definitely owned up to that cover. That cover, it earned that cover for sure. Really a fun book to read, more than just horror, and it's also not. It does similar stuff to Jaws in a sense. So if you like Jaws, maybe you'd like this, but I think it does a lot more than Jaws. At least I've never read the book Jaws, so at least more than you get from the movie. And kind of pretty graphic, I think, at some points. It's pretty graphic. It's a horror novel, so I mean, you should know that. But okay, I would say if you're an animal lover, you might not enjoy every moment of that book because there's a lot of animal. It's like a lot of like animal attacks type stuff. So. I mean, I don't know. The animals go first, right? It's like they're always like starting the fight. So, maybe they, I don't know what to say about that. People are defending themselves. Next, we have Ramsey Campbell's Hungry Moon. I went into this book, which is about this town in this small kind of hidden away town in England that has this well that's very deep, and there's this druidic ritual associated with it. And this Christian evangelist brings his sort of congregation, this sort of like cultish Christian congregation, to the town to get them to do this ritual. And it seemed like at first this was going to be some sort of like Christian cult like type thing, and it kind of was, but it also went completely sideways from that. It went to like really crazy surreal horror, and it was a lot of fun. I definitely got, to me at least, it seemed like it had vibes that were similar to like the weird dreamlike quality that you get in like Silent Hill or something like that. So a lot of fun. Ramsey Campbell's Hungry Moon. And I read a lot of John Christopher this year, and the Tripod series was really great. I read the first book quite a while ago and had a weird reaction to it. Just didn't thought it was okay, and reread it this year and enjoyed it, and then read the second and third book and then the prequel. I like them all, but it would be a little unfair for me to put a whole series in here. I will say that the second book, City of Golden Lead, I really enjoyed. I really liked it. I really liked the sort of uncovering the truth behind the tripods and what's going on that happened in that book was really great. Really interesting. I like what Christopher did, where he had to sort of figure out how the tripods worked, and his sort of talk about that in the introduction to that book. Made for a very enjoyable read. I really liked it. I liked the whole series, honestly. They were all really good. And the second book definitely benefits from the work done in the first book. But I really enjoyed that. So I'm just going to put the second book in here in this slot and say that was one of my favorites of that series, I suppose. And then kind of is honestly a real surprise to me. It's a novelization from a screenplay, and I just didn't think it was going to be great, but it ended up being a lot of fun, and that's Alan Dean Foster's novelization of Bill Lancaster's screenplay for The Thing. It's an out-of-print book. You can't. You have to buy it secondhand. Their prices are collector prices, and it ended up being a whole lot of fun. If you like The Thing, then I would highly recommend considering paying these prices for this novelization that Alan Dean Foster wrote. It's very high. I think more than $60 for a paperback, probably. I think it's a lot. I'm not really sure why this particular book is out of print. I don't really know what the deal is with it, especially when Foster's novelization of Alien, or Aliens, I'm not sure which it is in print. I don't really know why this one isn't. I don't know what's going on with the copyright there, but for whatever reason, it isn't in print, which is a shame because it is a lot of fun. I don't know how much work is done by Bill Lancaster as far as like setting the groundwork, like the character work, I guess, is done by him and his screenplay. Either way, Foster makes this book feel like an 80s horror movie. It's really great. It's just a really great mood. If you enjoy that movie, if you enjoy John Carpenter's The Thing, Alan Dean Foster's novelization of that is actually a lot of fun. And it does some things that the book doesn't. It honestly was a rewarding experience. I got more out of it than just from the movie. And I think there's some great, interesting tones set there. I'll probably talk about that book separately. And the original Campbell story, Who Goes There, in another video coming up pretty soon, I hope. Yeah, I think so. And then we have Ted Simon's Jupiter's Travels, a book I didn't talk about on here. It's a nonfiction book. Ted Simon was a journalist who decided to take a Triumph motorcycle and ride it essentially across every continent in the 70s. It's a book I've wanted to read for a long time. I expected one thing, and it was kind of different than what I thought it was going to be. I thought it was going to be a lot more of like it was a lot more introspective than I thought it was going to be. So I definitely want to talk about that and make something on it. I just haven't done it yet, but highly recommended. If that sounds kind of interesting to you, it's really great, really great. Just sort of one of those things that, is sort of this unique moment in time that he was able to do this thing that I don't think you could do now. I don't know. I'm not saying you couldn't, but I just don't think that it would work the same way anymore. So it's a really interesting sort of look at, a modern British person at that time in the 70s, look at all these different countries as he crosses through them and the different responses they have and the different interactions he had with people. But that was wonderful. It just sort of randomly came across my radar, and so I decided to read it. And that's Senlin Ascends by Josiah Bancroft, a sort of steampunkish sort of like fantasy story about this young couple who goes to the Tower of Babel and sort of on a honeymoon, and they get separated, and then it's Senlin, who is the husband, trying to find his wife and all the difficulty he has in locating her and the sort of crazy, bizarre things that go on at the tower. Really unexpectedly pleasant read. I kind of worried that it was going to be a little too silly or a little too sweet, but it ended up being just right. It just hit that note just right, and a kind of like a great little, slightly swashbuckly adventure that could like almost be silly, but just backed off before it became ridiculous. And I think it just hit like a really good note there. So really enjoyed that. Looking forward to reading the rest of that series. Hopefully, maybe this year. Definitely at least more of this series this year. I can't promise the whole series, but maybe it's totally possible. Before I get to my top three, I want to talk about what I guess was my biggest disappointment for this year, and that was Marlon James's Moon Witch Spider King. I talked about in my 22 read wrap up, or whatever you want to call it, how I was very excited to read that book, and I read it very early in 23. I think I read it in January, February. I just didn't like it. I just didn't. I mean, I could give you lots of reasons. I just felt like I didn't really want to come on and talk about it, because even though I had kind of a stronger reaction to it, because I thought maybe my reaction could be off, or that I needed more time to reflect, and I did. And I just still can't really come up with a lot of positive feelings about the book. It may be that on a reread, I would feel a little differently about it. It just felt like the book, it's definitely a different type of book. It builds itself up in the first third as sort of like building tension, and you think that you're getting ready for something. Something's going to happen. We're going to build towards this crescendo, and then it's going to break, and that's when the adventure type stuff is going to start. We're going to get out of this like very kind of harsh sort of setting that the book sets up. But when the second part of the book starts, it completely goes sideways, and it became a very different book. It became like a family saga or something, and kind of like, I wouldn't exactly call it erotica or anything, but like romance-ish, sort of. And then it's not exactly unexpected, but sort of anticlimactic thing happens in the end of that second thing. And then you get to the adventurous side of this book in the last third, and then it sort of like starts to tie in with the events from the first book in the series, Black Leopard, Red Wolf. And that was okay, but the thing I didn't love about that, which would have otherwise been okay, is that it makes you dislike the story from it sort of like undercuts the work that was done in the first book. And I can understand that, because the character in this book, Moon Witch Spider King, she doesn't like that character from Black Leopard, Red Wolf. They don't like each other. But it also just sort of felt, I don't know. it didn't help that the first 2/3 of the book really hadn't won me over. I was fine with the book, you know, being this family saga, but then it just sort of did some strange stuff and just sort of changed that all over again. And I just felt like that was such a, weird pacing. The pacing was off. It just felt kind of drawn out. And it didn't really feel like it was very unrewarding in that way. So I didn't have a lot of great experiences with it. I suppose if I go on to read the third book, that I would reread this second book to give it another shot. I'm not super hopeful, but that's all right. I still enjoyed the first book, and I can see what was maybe trying to happen in the second book. It just didn't work for me. So then my three favorites, the first one of those is Garth Marenghi's Terrortome, which is a horror novel of an 80s style variety that sort of pokes a bit at like Stephen King and Dean Koontz and Clive Barker. It kind of messes with the style of those three writers and does its own thing. Really entertaining. Just laugh out loud funny. I really enjoyed it. I've got the second book in Incarcerate, I think I can't remember the name of the book. It's something just like that. Has come out just at the end of last year. I have that book, so I plan to read that this year, soonish. I'm not sure. I've got so many books that are in the soonish category. It'll be this year. I just don't know when. So I'm definitely looking forward to reading the second book. I enjoyed the first one so much. It was such a fun book to read. Second was a recommendation that I got for Fredrick Pohl's Gateway, and I really enjoyed it. Fredrick Pohl is a writer who I'd read probably short works of before, but never read any of his novels, and Gateway was very rewarding. It's a sort of space opera setup. There's this ancient alien technology discovered in space. This space station has these ships that can take you across the galaxy to these sites that may have alien relics there that are very valuable because humans don't understand how this alien technology works. They don't even know exactly how to set the ships up to go to these different places. And this space opera setup, but it's if like the people that were in that story were real, and the problems that they deal with are real problems. So it sort of is a very unromantic look at space opera and that space opera setup. And it's actually, the science fiction is not particularly the star of that story. It's the people and the sort of real world people struggles and how real people would react to these sort of very epic and sort of very harsh conditions. It's definitely a story where you don't necessarily like the main character. I mean, I didn't even like the main character at a certain point, and that's on purpose. But you still sort of sympathize with him. It's a very human story, and I love that when, especially genre fiction, tries to sort of rise above itself and become just fiction. And I think that's what we've got here in Fredrick Pohl's Gateway. And then last was Qntm, Qntm's Valuable Humans in Transit. In my video, I said variable. Sorry about that. It's a collection of short work, sort of exploring humans and technology. A lot of it was been like human consciousness and like online presence and stuff like that. Really great science fiction with a huge helping of existential dread and horror. Really great stuff. It's so hard to talk about any of that stuff without spoiling it. For example, one story is about this character who says he's trapped in a room. He doesn't know who put him there, and all his only interface is this computer that he can talk to people on this website and try and say, "Come find me. I'm somewhere. Help me." And no one believes him because they say he's just a computer program, just set up to sort of like this like little chat room to sort of talk to people. And he finds the difficulty of trying to convince someone that he's real. And that's just one of those stories. And that, I don't even know if I really did that justice, but that just kind of gives you an idea as to kind of stuff that's there. But there's a whole lot more than that. So Valuable Humans in Transit, really great, very, I would say modern science fiction in that sense. Very much exploring the concepts and ideas, and an idea type thing. It kind of gets back to that sort of like the source or the wellspring of science fiction, which is technology and what it would mean to people, and less about like, flying spaceships battling each other, and less about that and more about like an idea and what it means for what that technology means or what it means when humans sort of interact with it. So that's it for 23. A lot of great stuff. Tried a lot of things. Some of them not as exciting as others, but a lot of great reads this year that I really enjoyed. In 24, I'm still reading some of the Japanese theme reads that I'm doing. I'm reading Musashi right now. Rashomon's coming up, or maybe at the same time. Finished Shogun. Finished, let me think, Lefkadi O'Hearn's Japanese Ghost Stories. I just haven't made a thing on Lefkadi O'Hearn yet. And there might be a couple other little books sprinkled in there. Maybe, maybe not. Finished Pandora's Star. That was a recommendation from last year. I finally got to it and finished it. Really enjoyed that. So it ends on a literal cliffhanger, but it was a lot of fun. And then I've got some other books, just, lots of stuff. I kind of made a list for myself for 24, and I just made a list, and I was like, this list is huge. I kind of set myself up to say, I'll read 60 books, That's my, reading goal in Goodreads or whatever, which I think I can achieve. Because they say I read 64 last year, this 23, which is accurate probably because some of those reads were short stories and some of them I didn't even count because they're rereads or whatever. So I did actually read that many when you do all the math, I guess. So 60 seems, that. But I had this list. This list is like 50 or 60 books. I'm like, why did I plan out my whole year? There's no way I'll stick to this. I'll read maybe half of these. And that's it. So I've got a list. I just am not holding myself to it because I'm like, oh yeah, I read this book and read this book. And I'm like, there's no way. I'm never going to get through all these. Well, we'll see how it goes. But I'm cautiously optimistic. So thank you very much for watching. My name is Virgil, and this is Literally Books. If you enjoy what I'm doing here, you can always like and subscribe. We'll be talking about books more this year. That's literally what we do. Literally. That's it. Bye.